Welcome everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to do all challenges from my arrays tutorial. So the first challenge was to create a program that can hold 5 car makes and the user has to put them into the array. So very easy, we are going to create an array of strings. So string, let's call it cars, equals new string. How many did it ask? 5. So we're going to put 5 right here. And we also need the other square brackets there. Perfect. So we need to do cars and then an element equals console.readLine. And we'll say console.writeLine. Please input the make of a car. So we've done this once. As you saw in my video, I don't like it when people just do this 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a huge waste of coding space, and it does make your code look quite ugly. So let's do a for loop to input the cars instead. And luckily 2022 predicts that we want to loop through this array. So we've started at 0 and we've ended at the length of the cars and we're increasing by 1. So the only thing we need to change is instead of doing 0, we just need to use the I variable, and there we go. So we're going to do 5 different inputs, so I can put whatever I like in this array. It does say cars, but we can just do whatever we like. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And to make sure your array is working correctly, we're going to say this is our input for loop, and this is our output for loop, just to test it out. So we're going to remove that. We're going to remove that. And we're going to put this in a console.writeLine just to see what we are making sure that anything we enter into our array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 should get printed out in the same order. So that's challenge 1. That is how we can input into an entire array. Challenge 2 was create a program that can calculate the sum of all elements in an integer array. So let's create an integer array. We're going to call it numbers. Let's use the same numbers as this challenge, just so we know what it should add up to. So I don't know about you, I'm not very good at maths. So 6, 8, 9, and 10. And this is an integer array now. So we'll keep this for loop, but we're going to change that to go from 0 to the length of the number array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another integer variable to store the total of the integers. So we're going to start that at 0. So the idea is every time we go through the loop, we're going to say the total is equal to the total plus the current element of the array. So first time through the loop, total is going to be 0, and then it's going to be adding 0 plus 6, which is the first element of the array, to the total, so that would be equal to 6. So second time through the loop, 6 would become 6 plus the next one 8, which would be 14. So it would keep adding them all together until we get the result. So let's just make sure this is working correctly. And there we go. So that's added them all up. Next one was, how can we find the average of all elements in this array? So we're going to keep an integer because it's saying to round down. So we could do it as a decimal, but it suggests that we just round it. So we're going to create another integer called average. Now let's make it so it doesn't matter how many numbers are in this array, it always finds the average even if I give it a different array. So instead of saying after we've added them all together, instead of saying average is equal to the total divided by, so 1, 2, 3 divided by 4, which would only work with this array, we can instead say we are going to divide it by the length of the array. So that means that this length, the average is 33, not 33. I need to actually output the average. So the average is 8. So 33 divided by 4 rounds down to 8. But if I was to add another number, so for example, let's add 11. That is also 8. Obviously, I should add some larger numbers to get the average a bit. So let's change these numbers. So we've got a slightly higher average. So now our average is 9, but notice that because even though we added more numbers, so let's say we'll add a 1, which is going to bring the average down. There we go, that's brought the average down. It still works. So no matter what the length of this array is, it still works because I've coded it to work with the length of the array. That's the strength of using the length of the array command here. So we can use it in the for loop and this average sum, and we don't need to change anything else of anything in the code if we just change the array. So challenge 4 is a little bit tricky. So we're going to create an array of random numbers, and we're going to find the highest and the lowest. So let's use this one for now. So we know the highest is 11 and the lowest is 1. Okay, so this can be a little bit tricky, but if you're struggling, a big clue is create two integers called highest and start that at 0. So let's just find the highest for now. Okay, so we've created an integer starting at 0 called highest. Inside the for loop, we can do something to check whether the highest and compare it to each element of the array. So pause the video if you think you know what to do now. So if you still can't figure out what to do, what we can do is we can use a selection statement. We can say if the highest, no, we're going to do the current element in the array. So that is the number with the brackets and then whatever element we're looking at is equal to, so is greater than the highest. Then what we're going to do is we are going to replace the highest with that number. We're going to say that is equal to that num0 here. Why have I got a red underline? Num does not exist in the current context. That's because it's called nums, not num. There we go. So if I was to, at the end of this, if I was to write down out the highest, I should get 11 because 11 is the highest in the list. Yeah. So let's test it out. Let's change a number. Let's change that to 14. So now it should find that 14 is the highest. So essentially what this is doing is it's looping through every single one and comparing it to this highest variable. So first it's checking 9. Is 9, so is 9 greater than highest? Well, yes it is. So we're going to update 9 again. Then it's going to check the next one. Is 9 greater than 9 this time? No, it's not, so it's just going to skip this line. Then it's 14, so nums is going to be equal to 14. Is that greater than highest? Yes, it is. So it's then going to check. It's then going to replace the highest with 14. Then it's going to check 10. 10 is not higher than 14, so it's going to ignore this line, and it's going to do it the same with 11 and 1, and that's how we get the 14 output. So we found the highest. How do we find the lowest now? Quite simply, we're going to do the same again. We'll create another variable called lowest. We'll do the exact same selection statement, except we're going to check against the lowest, and we're going to check is the current number lower than the lowest. And obviously we need to update the lowest. And we'll output the lowest after the highest. Let's do a little message. Lowest equals, that's not the lowest. That should go there, and this one should say highest equals. Now you may have already spotted an issue here, is that I'm starting lowest at 0 already. So problem with that is it's going to output 0 because nothing in that array is lower than 0. So what can we do to solve this? There's a few different options. You can start the array at a number higher than everything in the array. So highest number is 14. So let's say we start at, oops, no, didn't mean to update that one. Let's say we start at 100. 100, there you go. So with that, we found that the lowest is 1. Let's just update it to 4. And it should find that the lowest is now 4. So that is fine. Problem with this is, what if some other programmer comes in, changes the array, and suddenly all of the numbers are actually higher than what we've done our lowest with. That no longer works. So the lowest isn't actually 100. That's our default one, and the lowest is now 110. So this is not going to work. What we can do instead is set the lowest to whatever the first element of the array is. So I'm going to set it to element 0 of our array. That means it's going to just by default set itself to the first one, then it's going to go through the loop and check all the rest of them and compare it to whatever the first one. If the first one's the lowest, it's just going to output that one, but then if it finds any lower, it's going to output that one as well. Not as well, instead. So now you can see, now it'll find 110, and no matter what I do, I can change this to all be above 1,000 now, and that will still work. We can see it's now found 1,110 as the lowest. So there you go, that is how we can find the highest and lowest numbers of an array. The final challenge was, how can you reverse an array? So if the array contains 5, 6, 7, 8, it's going to be reversed to 8, 7, 6, 5. So let's make an array of 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's remove the rest. And we're going to start with simply an array that's going to print it out, just so we can test what the array currently is. So at the end of the program, I'm just going to run the print array. Make sure this works. So 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's what we want to print out, but we want to print it out in reverse, and we want to reverse everything in this array. There isn't an easy way to do this with one array. However, what we can do is we can create a second array called, let's call it nums reverse. Now I want to do as least coding as possible in case someone changes this array. So the idea is, no matter what this array is, the rest of the code will work without having me to change the rest of the code. So I could start it at 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's 4 elements in this array. Problem is, what if I add another element? So I'm going to do 9. So, but what I'm going to essentially do is I'm going to place everything into this reverse array, but I'm going to replace it in reverse order. So as I said, the problem is, if I add another element to this array is not going to fit the rest of these elements in yet. So how can we solve this? We'll use the length of the array to create this array. So we're going to create the nums reverse, and then we're going to use the length of the array to make sure that this array is the same length as the first array. So what we can do from here is we're going to place everything from this array into this array. The way we can do that is by simply saying nums reverse is equal to nums. Now that is fine. Only problem is that it's putting it in the same order. So 5, 6, 7, 8. So how do we make sure it's in the reverse order? So we want to say that we want to keep this for loop in this order. However, we want this one to reverse the order. So there's a few different ways we can do this. The easiest way to do this is actually create a number counting down. So we're going to do a counter and we're going to start it at the length of this array. So there we go. So we've got the counter start at the length of the array. Every time we go through this loop, the counter gets reduced by 1. So I think we need to start the counter reducing by 1 before. So if that starts at 5, we need to start going 1 as element 0 goes into element 4. So I think this should do it. If I've done it right, then if I print out the nums reverse array, it should go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 on the screen, which it did not. So I've done something a little bit wrong. That's because I forgot to put the counter in there. So there we go. It should do it now. So there we go. So to explain this a little bit better, what's happening is the number array is using this I variable. This I variable is starting at 0 and ending at 4. The counter I've started at 5, minus 1 goes to 4, and then as we go through each loop, it's going to go 4, minus 1, 3, minus 1, 2, minus 1, 1, and then to 0. So as this integer array is starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, the other array is going to go from 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So that is how it's going to reverse the array. Create another array, put them in reverse. We can then copy over the array originally, so we can say the nums is equal to nums, and we're both going to say I this time. So what it's going to do is just going to simply make a copy of this array and place it into the numbers array, and then we can print the numbers array, and we'll see that that numbers array has now been reversed to 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Now there is a slightly different way we can do without using this counter. So what we can do instead is we can say I, but we can say, what's the length of the array? Well, the length is 5, yeah? So we can say, well, we want to start at 4. So 4 minus I. So it's going to start at 4 minus I in the loop. Second time this loop, what's 4 minus I? Well, 4 minus I is 3. So this is essentially going to count down. So it's going to do the exact same thing. Again, if I change the length of the array, it's not quite going to work. So if I add another element of the array, it's going to actually crash because we're going to go out of range. So what should I replace this 4 with? Well, I can replace this 4 with the length of the array as well. So let's create another integer just called length of the array. So int len of array. We'll start the length of the array with at nums.length. So there we go. So I could replace this with the length of the array, and that means it doesn't matter what size I do, it's always going to work. So let's see if this works. So notice that it crashed, and I was expecting it to crash. The reason is it's gone out of bounds. So the reason it's gone out of bounds is because the length of the array is 5, not 5. So in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the length of the array is 6. Let's put it back to the normal one. So this, the length of the array is 5. It'll still crash here as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What did I say it should start at? Well, it should start at 4, not 5. So what we can do is we can say that the length of the array is nums length and just do a -1 here. There we go. And now that works. So what you should always be trying to think of when you're using arrays is, does the rest of your program work even if you change the array. If you do, you've made a really good program that works very well with your arrays. So I can go 7, 3, 2, I can add anything I like to this array, and it will always reverse whatever I've put in, because I've programmed it in a way where I don't need to change anything else in the code if the array changes. And that is the end of that. So if you have any questions about any of the challenges, please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give this video a like and give me a subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.